Welcome to the State Industrial Products Training Series, Stripping and Finishing Floors. Today, you will learn why it is important to properly strip and finish floors, the necessary equipment needed for this procedure, as well as a step-by-step tutorial on the proper procedures for stripping and finishing floors. By the end of this video, you should be able to effectively, efficiently, and safely strip and finish floors. Perception is reality, and the perception that a facility is clean is very important to people. According to a recent survey, 80% of people believe that a facility looks cleaner after their floors have been stripped and finished, even if no other action has been taken. So with that being said, it is important to do the job effectively the first time in order to make it cost effective. With the labor typically taking up 70 to 80% of the overall cost, it is important that a staff is well trained before the beginning of this project. If certain steps are not done correctly, it could lead to the crew being forced to start the project over, which wastes their time and the company's money. Most importantly, the staff must be very careful. In this situation, you'll be working on a surface that is 10 times more slippery than ice. Caution is a must. So let's get started. Before we begin, here are the necessary tools and products needed for successful stripping and finishing of floors. First, here's the necessary equipment: a wet floor sign, a set of walk-off mats, a dust mop, 2 mop buckets, both hot and cold water, a set of mops, a dark pad or stripping brush, a doodle bug or utility pad, a wet-dry vacuum with a squeegee attachment, a bucket with a liner and a wringer, and a synthetic mop. As far as the products go, you will need a floor stripper and a floor finish. First, let's talk about stripping the floor. Step 1. Prepare the work area. Make sure you put up wet floor signs to ensure that no one attempts to walk in this area. If an unauthorized person were to enter during this process, they can be a liability to the facility. Also, it is important to place cardboard or walk-off mats at the end of the area that is being stripped. Step 2. Dust mop the floor. Before you begin stripping the floor, it is important to remove any and all debris from the floor. This includes dust, but also things like gum, tar, and residue. Step 3. Fill 2 mop buckets up with water. You will need hot water for stripping the floor and cool water for rinsing. Dilute the stripper with hot water, 5 parts water and 1 part stripper. Step 4. Apply the stripper to the floor. It is important to remove all finish from the floor, so remember, apply liberally and do not wring out the mop. Spread the solution over the area to be stripped and then let it stand for 10 to 20 minutes. Do not, however, allow the stripper to dry completely. Step 5. Begin stripping with a conventional floor machine. Use a dark pad or a stripping brush to remove the finish. To work most effectively, scrub lengthwise along the baseboards and scrub side to side across the remaining areas. When it comes time to strip the finish from the corners, use either a doodle bug or a utility pad. Step 6. Pick up the slurry. To do this, you should use a wet-dry vacuum with a squeegee attachment. It is important that you do not allow the slurry to dry on the floor. Step 7. Rinse the floor thoroughly. For this process, use a clean mop and water and flood rinse the floor. Please note, you should not use the same mop and bucket as you used for stripping. Next, wipe all baseboards before they are allowed to dry. Repeat this process until all residues are removed or until the water picked up no longer foams. This step is important because if not done correctly, it will lead to poor adhesion, swirling, powdering, and peeling. Step 8. Take time to allow the floor to dry completely. Step 9. Clean up. Completely rinse all of the buckets and wringers used for this process. Also, wash and rinse all mops. After they are washed, allow them to hang dry away from the walls. Next, we will talk about finishing the floor. Step 1. Inspect the floors. It is important that the floor is clean, dry, and free from residue before you begin to apply the finish. Step 2. Prepare the area. Place a wet floor sign in the area you are working to warn people of slippery floors and prevent use. Step 3. Apply the first coat of finish. For this step, you must use a bucket with a liner and a wringer as well as a synthetic mop. Pour the finish into the bucket and immerse the clean mop into the finish. Make sure you wring out the mop completely before applying to avoid dripping. Next, Begin to apply the floor finish parallel to the baseboards. Be careful though, not to coat the baseboards. After coating the area along the baseboards, create a U-shaped section of applied finish. Coat the area inside the U using a back and forth stroke. Be sure to coat the entire floor and then allow the first coat to completely dry. This should take between 45 minutes and an hour. Step 4. Apply additional coats of finish. A floor needs between 5 and 7 coats of finish before it is completed. It is also important to make sure each coat is completely dry before adding additional coats. When finished, allow floor to dry as long as possible before opening floors to regular traffic. Step 5. Clean up. Discard all of the unused finish from the mop buckets and never pour unused finish back into the container. Lastly, thoroughly wash and rinse all of the equipment used. In review, here are the 9 steps to stripping a floor. Step 1. Prepare the work area with a wet floor sign and walk-off mats. Step 2. Dust mop the floor and remove all residue left on the floor. Step 3. Fill 2 mop buckets with water, hot water for stripping and cold water for rinsing. Step 4. Apply the stripper to the floor, keeping in mind you will need to apply liberally and cover the entire surface. Step 5. Continue the stripping process using a conventional floor machine to remove the finish. Step 6. Pick up any slurry left behind, making sure none dries on the floor. Step 7. Rinse the floor thoroughly, removing anything left behind. Step 8. Allow the floor to completely dry before moving on to the finishing process. And Step 9. Clean up your work area. And here are the 5 steps for properly finishing a floor. Step 1. Inspect the floor, making sure it is completely clean and free from dust or residue. Step 2. Prepare the area by setting up a wet floor sign. Step 3. Apply the first coat of finish and allow it to dry completely. Step 4. Apply additional coats of finish once the first coat dries. It is important to note that each coat must dry before applying another coat.